podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. Thank you for tuning in today to yet another episode in 2021. I have a couple more episodes lined up for recording in the next week, which I'm excited to tell you about a bit later on. But for now, I'm going to be doing a solo episode. And sometimes I quite like to do a solo episode because it gives me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I know and what I think about things, share kind of, sometimes it's good just to think out loud, and it helps also you to formulate your own ideas and thinking around certain subjects. And today I wanted to talk to you about people risk in businesses and potentially turning that into an opportunity, because as you probably know by now, where there are challenges, I like to turn them into opportunities. So this came about because I've talked about risk and reputation for a long time now, and the role of public relations. In fact, I spoke at the CLN conference, the legal conference last year, about risk and reputation, and the role that we have to play. And I do believe that when we're working with risk teams, we need to be thinking not just purely on the health and safety side of things, but we do need to be thinking about things especially around cybersecurity, data and privacy, mental health, or health in general. Yes, human resources will be involved because it's a human resource thing. Risk managers will be involved because they are involved from a corporate and legal perspective. Lawyers will potentially be involved as well, depending on the scenario around it. And it's really important for us to start thinking about how these challenges can shape agendas on the board, so that the board is fully aware of these challenges, because sometimes it's not an obvious risk. Also, looking at those risks and then turning them into actionable solutions. So what is the opportunity to address them and to enrich essentially the business or the organisation at the same time? There will be different levels of risks, as we always know, so that's why a risk register is so important. And for those who questioned when I talked about risk registers a long time ago, about what that's got to do with public relations, well, let's just say that we all know that if you have a crisis plan, it's just a plan. But what we need to do is have a plan that has scenarios around it, that has played out options, thought through options, and ones that are going to be used at a time when required. So if these risks turn into risks that actually flare up into issues or into crisis, then the crisis plan has the risks and scenarios all played out in there, so that there can be a very immediate response to that, to stop that from flaring up any further, or turning into a real massive problem. But we also already know that risks are only a risk if you allow them to be a risk, and if you allow them to become even more than a risk, which is then turning into an issue or a crisis. Because by identifying risks in the first place, we have the opportunity to mitigate risks. And that again is where this sort of collaborative working between the different disciplines in HR and risk and public relations really comes into effect. And interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with somebody about communication the other day, and they kept talking about communications. And to me, communications in this sense very much is about the act of communicating. It's not about the strategy, the strategic thinking, the relationship, the anything like that. It's literally just what is being communicated when it is being communicated. As easily as people fling around the terminology comms. So within this risk and scenario discussion, it's definitely a public relations opportunity, and definitely a place for public relations where they need to be helping mitigate risks and working with the management and leadership teams, the board, etc., to ensure that everything's been accounted for, that the company and the organisation has been looked over with a fine tooth comb, and that everybody has been included within that conversation. If I look at the Mercer risk report that was recently put out, there's rankings from 1 to 10, and there's one for UK and one for global. The UK ranking number 1 is deteriorating mental health, and I think that's something that we are all mindful of, but we aren't necessarily all acting on. And that should be number 1 in a board agenda when we're reviewing risks. But also from a human perspective, we're all human beings, and the board meetings don't just have to be about profit and loss. They need to be not just about operations, they need to be about people, they need to be about stakeholders. And this comes back to my point always about stakeholders coming first, because your stakeholders are your staff, your team, your supply chain, your management team, your the media. Anybody that has a viewpoint or has an interest in your business or organization is a stakeholder, and therefore those stakeholders are absolutely essential to know who they are, what they stand for, what their needs are, but also you have a plan in place for each of those stakeholder groups to keep them engaged and to keep them on side and to keep them involved within the business and organization to help you make it better. And we all know that by engaging people in the right way at the right time, with the right conversation, we'll have the right outcome. That right outcome is essentially what we're talking about on the bottom line. So back to the ranking. So number 1 was deteriorating mental health. Number 2 was something I mentioned previously, cybersecurity. Number 3, talent attraction, retention, and engagement. And number 4, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 5, skills obsolescence. Number 6, workforce exhaustion. Number 7, succession and key person risk. 8, environment. 9, misalignment of HR and business strategy. And 10, conduct and culture. Now, nearly every single one of them, with I would say probably without including cybersecurity and environment, every single one of them is related to a person and people and to stakeholders. Every single one of them is related to your business performance, and I can't stress enough the need for us to be thinking about stakeholders, and not just relations and engagement from an activity point of view, but from a really 360-degree perspective about how they're integrated in your business or organization, what they put in, what they get out, what your feelings are about them, what their feelings are about you, but also what they think about each and every different element of those things we've talked about in that ranking. How did they feel about mental health? How did they feel about skills? How did they feel about the environment? Without having a full understanding and a deep understanding of these people, then I think that businesses and organizations are being delusional, thinking they can just go ahead. Like most of the most successful business performance, particularly over the last I was going to say 18 months, it probably is about 18 months now, a year and a half through the pandemic, has been those businesses that have looked after their people, because their people have been there and been looked after and are healthy and are safe and are performing because they believe in the business and because they have a great relationship with the business. Each and every single one of these points, from 1 to 10 that I've just mentioned in the ranking table, is probably a really great opportunity for me to do a separate podcast on each of them. So if anyone out there that listens to my podcast wants to pitch in on any of those 10 points, I'll put the 10 points in the show notes. If you want to pitch in and have a chat about them, come on the podcast, and please do let me know, because I think it's so important that these points are covered off. Just so you have a perspective on the global ranking versus the UK ranking, the first thing that is ranked globally is cybersecurity. That's not necessarily saying that the deteriorating mental health is less important globally than it is in the UK. But I think if you think of what the UK has gone through more than other countries in terms of lockdowns and Brexit and the Scottish independence referendum, all the farces that our government has put us through over the last 18 months, then I think that's possibly an indication as to part of the deteriorating mental health, but also just part of our culture of not necessarily being open talking about mental health and not being great at managing it, which we're getting better at, but just to kind of put that in perspective. However, again, if you want to have a chat about that and come on the podcast, let me know. So number 1, global ranking, cybersecurity. Number 2 is talent attraction, retention, engagement. That's versus 3 in the UK. Number 3 in the global perspective is data privacy. Data privacy isn't actually mentioned in the UK list. Workforce exhaustion, number 4 versus number 6 in the UK. Skills obsolescence, which is actually 5 and 5 in the UK as well. Number 6 globally is deteriorating mental health. So that's not high up on the ranking, and that could be for a number of reasons. It'd be great to be able to explore that. Succession and key person risk is equally number 7. Number 8, communicable health conditions is global, which again isn't actually on our list for the UK. Number 9 is increasing health risk protection and wellbeing benefit costs globally. And number 10 is conduct and culture, and that's equal for the UK as well. So we're looking here at around a mixture of health and safety, talent practices, governance and financials, environment and social, and accelerated digitisation. And I think that this is a huge conversation. And it's one that I would like to be able to address across a series of podcasts, potentially 10 actually episodes, talking about each individual point. I think I'll keep it to a UK perspective. I think the majority of my listeners are in the UK, and it's where I have the most knowledge. And obviously my own experience is based in the UK and Scotland as well. So, yeah, really interesting report. But I think from a public relations perspective, this is where we have to start looking to look at these risks, mitigate these risks, and have plans in place that if issues arise around them or a crisis hits, then there's a plan in place and we're ready for it. But that comes again about collaborative working, and yeah, there's just so much of a conversation here. I'm excited to kind of delve into it a little bit more. If you've got any thoughts, or you fancy sharing my podcast, I'd be really grateful. Again, as I said, if you fancy featuring in the podcast to talk about any of these 10 areas, then I would be delighted to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of People by People. I've kept it fairly short and sweet today, but stay tuned for interviews coming up with John Brown, Michelle Goodall, and for my next 10 episodes based on the conversation around the risk to the UK and to people, etc. It's going to be a really interesting series. I'm hoping maybe to do one a week. Let's see how we get on. Thanks for tuning in. Please do leave a review. Please share the podcast, because I don't know if you saw, but I got ranked number 5 out of 10 top public relations podcasts, which is so exciting, because obviously People by People is a passionate, definitely a passionate podcast. It's not one that's fully scripted, I don't have specific questions to go back and forward with people. It's very much a conversation because it's about people, their skills, experience, and the wider conversation of public relations, which I'm hoping is proving valuable for everybody out there. So thanks again, and stay tuned for the next episode in a week's time.